Hey guys, Derek here, and today we're going to be taking a look at what sim racing titles are the best for VR. So if you're coming from screens or you're just starting to get into VR and you want to explore what the best options may be for you, we're going to kind of outline potentially different settings, what I think is the most immersive racing experience. Coming off just close to 1,500 hours of Steam VR now. I spent hundreds of hours tinkering, with different settings, with different hardware even, and with different headsets even. So I feel like I'm coming from a standpoint where I do have a decent amount of experience with this stuff, and I've kind of tuned things to get them as optimized as possible, and that's why I want to, share basically kind of my findings and what I think the best VR racing title is. So I'll also take some time and kind of share my settings for each one of these titles and explain why or why not I think that they're that good to start off in VR. So we're going to go for a drive in each one of these in VR, and then at the end kind of go over, what I think the best settings are that I've found and what I think the most immersive experience is. All right, so yeah, let's get into it, guys. All right, guys, so we're going to be starting off with almost the most controversial sim. So this is Rfactor 2 here, so I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough of what graphic settings I'm currently using for this test, and for this explanation of what I recommend this in VR. So right now we can see the top here doesn't really matter because we're in VR, so that kind of overwrites it. However, I do have post-processing effects turned all the way off. MSAA just on 2, so that way there's some, anti-aliasing, otherwise it looks really jagged. And then my main graphic settings here, I've knocked these down from full to high. I keep texture on full because texture on high, it actually is like, you can't quite read it, so it needs to be on full. 16x here, the rest basically low or off. So yeah, this is the settings that I'm running with, and the problem with Rfactor 2 is I have it demonstrated in a time frame where it's going to be able to show this, just so it doesn't take too long for it to actually kick in. Let me just go into a practice setting and knock this to 5 p.m. Alright, let's go ahead and click race here. So I have loaded into this a few times, so it should load pretty dang fast, and we're going to just kind of discuss about, how this experience is in VR. So Rfactor 2, it's it can be the best and it can also be the downright worst. So it is kind of a sim of compromises, especially in VR. So the thing is with this game, if you're doing multi-car grid, or if you're doing evening or morning, sunset, sunrise, that's where you run into all your problems, and this game basically becomes an afternoon hot lap simulator. So let's get into our first couple of laps here. So we're going to see right up the bat, our GPU usage is at 85. We're using an overclocked 3090 and a 9900K. 9900K is running at 4.8 gigahertz. I knocked it down from 5 just to keep temps kind of under control. And, our GPU usage is relatively low until it's not. So let's go ahead and hit a couple laps here. So Rfactor 2, I'm going to say without question is the most engaging driving experience out of any sim. And people who spend a good amount of time in Rfactor 2, I'm sure they're not going to hesitate to kind of back that up. And, real life drivers, I was watching the Mitch Hoyer, who's an Rfactor 2 player. He was streaming with a professional driver, and they're doing this new LMP car, and he says, yeah, the Rfactor 2 model it's the closest to real life that they can get. And, Rfactor 2, the way the cars behave is the most like real life. And the behavior on the limits and whatnot is the most like real life, as they were saying. So we're going to just go ahead and hit a couple laps here. That's besides the point, but we're just talking about more so from an actual VR perspective. Like if you're just got, maybe your new VR headset and you want to dive in, you got like a G25 or G29 wheel or, whatever, and you're looking at what games to potentially try out or get into, would Rfactor 2 be one of them? So we're going to run into the main problem in just a short little while here. So that being, well, one, we have to knock back a bunch of graphic settings, and two, if we have multi-cars being rendered on the grid at the same time, my cutoff is like 6 before it starts to get unplayable, and then also the day-night cycle, or if you have weather. So for instance, if I put in a bunch of clouds, and all of a sudden new shadows had to pop up on different places, your FPS is going to go down. But the problem is no matter if I lower my Steam super sampling, if I lower more graphic settings, it doesn't matter. It seems to be whenever that time period hits of the evening or the early morning or night, your FPS drops by almost 30. So we'll see now I'm at 90. There's even a car beside me, 90 FPS, 76 GPU usage. A lot of room to still, pump out some power if need be. So this driving experience is fantastic. And we're going to be using Road Atlanta. I probably should have introduced at the beginning. iRacing's on Road Atlanta currently. I have Road Atlanta across all games. And I have the Ferrari GT3, 488 GT3 across all titles as well. So we're just going to be using this as a reference point and talking about immersion. Now, of course, if I want to get a bit more immersed, I'm going to put my seatbelt on, my gloves on, my shoes on. But for today's purposes, we don't really need to do that. We're just going to be more talking about the experiences that I've had, driving in VR. So this game definitely seems like it's tailored a bit more towards screens. Like this is the one. The thing is that sucks is that this would be, I think, my favorite simulator. This is the one I would probably spend the most hours in. But I just can't because I'm a VR driver now, and in my VR versus triples video, this game is making me wonder if I should just go back and pick up the triples just for Rfactor 2. Because this game, I can ultra everything, ultra post-processing, ultra everything, and on one screen I'm at over 200 FPS sitting pretty. In 3 screens I was maxing everything out over 100 FPS no problem. So I don't know what it is in this title where VR is not that much harder in other titles, but in Rfactor 2 it just is for some reason. So here's the issue we're going to be running into. So I can see the sun start going down, I see some shadows getting casted, and here we are. So now we're at 93% GPU usage, we're at 80 FPS instead of 90. So again, the problem in VR is if you're not at your refresh rate or you're not at 90, it's choppy, it's different. It feels like you're moving in slow motion. So I'm at 78, so again, this is the main problem with Rfactor 2 in VR for me, is if there are cars on the grid or if the sun is going down or coming up, you just can't hit the performance. And I feel like even on a 3090, no matter what settings I throw at it, I kind of can't do it. And maybe if I turned everything off, which I actually haven't tried, and lowering my resolution, but then at that point it's like, why would I play, Rfactor 2? Yeah, the driving experience is the most engaging, but if I have to make it look like a PlayStation 1 game, I may as well boot this up on a monitor, or go invest in triple screens and get it, an experience out of it that way. But yeah, we can see the issue that we're already running into. So this is why I say Rfactor 2 can be like the best VR driving experience, but it can also be the worst and frustrating, and you have to make X amount of compromises, especially if you're running lower end hardware. And I know I am running a Pimax 8KX, so it's obviously more demanding than something like an Oculus Rift S or a Quest 2, but again, so this is the issue that I have with the game. It becomes unplayable. I don't want to play in slow motion. The other games offer, AC modded out graphics, 20-car grid, no problem. iRacing, 20-car grid, no problem. But Rfactor 2, the graphics are very nice. They've come a long way. In fact, I would go as far as to say that when you're hot lapping solo, you can turn a lot of settings up. I think it's just like how it renders the weather, the AI. I don't know, it's so hard for VR, but if you're in the afternoon, you can basically max out the graphic settings, put your post-processing on medium or high, and still get your 90 FPS experience, and then that can kind of be the best simulator experience. However, it's boring after a while because it's just you, and I can't defend the sim as someone who's coming into VR and say, scoop up Rfactor 2 for sure, because there's too many issues. There's too many, it looks fantastic. It looks super sharp. And we'll talk about that as we get to Assetto Corsa, but like this game looks incredibly sharp, even in the distance. And I don't know, if it's the engine or what, but like, I have no problem seeing into the distance, even with like in VR. I know this is, a higher end headset, but AC looking into the difference is a lot different than, this game looking into the distance, or iRacing looking into the difference, which again we'll touch on a bit later. But yeah, that's Rfactor 2. So most engaging driving experience, has the potential to be the best sim in VR. Like right now, look at my FPS. I'm at 57. That's what I mean. It drops by almost 30. Like I'm legit over 30 FPS less on an overclocked 3090. I put in like, 10 cars in the grid, and I only see one of them visible. It's just the fact that the sun went down. So Rfactor 2, if you want to lock your time in the afternoon, if you want to have basically no cars on the grid, but then at that point you can actually like max out your settings, which is weird. So Rfactor 2, game of compromises, but can have the potential to be the best driving experience. But There's just too many compromises. Alright guys, so the next one we're in here is iRacing. So I'm just going to show my graphic settings that I've been currently using for VR. And this has made me withhold 90 FPS across 20 car grids, across any track, or even in the nighttime. I've done some Nürburgring, like the endurance with a Nordschleife, with like 20 cars, and you know, as soon as like the cars kind of break away from each other, it hits 90 FPS and holds it the entire time. So you can take a look at these settings. This is what I've been using for quite some time now, and it's always been getting me the FPS I've desired. So let's go ahead and go for a couple laps here, and we'll talk a little bit about iRacing. So I put it to the late afternoon, and I don't drive with the virtual mirror up. I find that somewhat distracting. But let's go ahead and get out of the pit lane here. So the difference being right now is, you know, it's already late afternoon. This is the point where, and I wanted to put it to late afternoon because this is the part where Rfactor 2 would give you 60 FPS instead of, you know, 90. But in iRacing, multi-car is going around, late afternoon, I'm at 87 GPU usage and 90 FPS. And iRacing has a very, almost died there, a very, like, kind of natural, like, you can tell it's not like a Madness engine, Unreal, like, it's not like very, you know, let's say ACC modern or AMS2 modern looking, but it's very sharp. It's like the engine is kind of giving off graphics that, you know, it still looks great and crystal clear, but you know, like these buses off to the side, like this looks, you know, 1990s computer graphics. But the car interiors look great, the road looks great, the other cars look great, shaders look great. The graphics are very good. They're very good, natural. It's very immersive. It's a very immersive title for sure. And here we are. So let me look. I know I have to kind of, the FOV in this headset's humongous. I have to look down even further than I think to show FPS VR. So here we go, straight with the pit lane. So even with the pit lane and all the other cars here, 90 FPS, 84 GPU usage, room to spare basically. Wasn't looking, I had my head down. So let's head back to the road and we can talk a little bit more about that. Alright, so picking up here though, so is iRacing, again, we want to not drift too far away from the main topic at hand here. Is, you know, would you recommend these for VR, and, you know, is this the most immersive VR experience? So the thing is, if you're into racing, like actual racing, this is by a long shot the easiest and best way to get into it in terms of an online perspective. There's always, you know, multiple classes, multiple tracks running with populated servers at all times basically. So it's really easy to just pick up and go. However, the cost of iRacing is, like, you have to spend, you know, once you get out of your rookie class, you have to spend at least a few $100s to start really getting, you know, enjoyable experiences, start getting a half decent track list. And you may want to spend money in cars right away, but really what you need is tracks. Otherwise you're not going to be doing too much participating. So you need to make sure, maybe if you're going to race GT3s, maybe start out with one GT3 that you think you'll use, and then go buy your tracks. So that's for someone getting started. Also in iRacing, I didn't know about it, but looking up the current series, that was very important. You know, me going into iRacing right away, I picked up the McLaren, and I just picked up a Spa, like a couple tracks I thought that was going to be fun. However, there was nothing ever running for that time, for that schedule. So make sure you look at your current series, and, you know, buy stuff accordingly. Now, so that's for people just starting to get into iRacing. That's something I wish that I knew. But from a VR standpoint, iRacing it's incredible. Day, night, the graphics turned up, shaders on ultra. It's 79 GPU usage, just running flawless. Now, is the driving experience as engaging as Rfactor 2? Not really. Is the force feedback as good? Heck no. But, you know, the cars, the most recent update that iRacing did to their GT3s, because I like racing in GT3s, like, man, you can drive confidently now. It's almost like there's too much grip now, where to the point where you're just absolutely pushing it, and it's like almost hard to make the thing spin out unless you hit curbs or grass. In which case, you know, if you hit grass in this game and hit the brakes, you're gone. But really, it's almost like more difficult to make the cars spin now, compared to some other titles. And my lap times in iRacing, like at Road Atlanta, if I were to compare some lap times here, I'm always the fastest in iRacing. So if I play this map on Assetto Corsa, if I do it on Rfactor 2, now I know Rfactor 2 is a downloaded content. I'm not sure if they're like, I think it was laser scanned, but still, my confidence in driving in iRacing is much higher than any of the other titles. Like here, I'm just flooring it, no problem. If I time this right, I can floor it through here. I think I did a small lift, but like, you can really push, I feel like, with the latest update. You can really hammer the car. It is a very engaging driving experience. However, it's not as much through the wheel communication, not as much, you know, car communication, let's say, as Rfactor 2. But man, in VR, it would be very difficult. The only thing is price. It's very hard to not recommend iRacing. Again, like I'm running a 3090 and I'm running the 8KX. It's heavy duty stuff. But let's look down here right now, for instance, 93% GPU usage, so the sun's like really setting right now. This is when the post-processing, this is why I like testing in this scenario. This is where the post-processing stuff is really coming into play, and this is where the game is going to be very hard to run. Because once full-on night mode hits, your FPS actually goes up a bit. And then once the afternoon hits, your FPS goes up like crazy. But these times is when it's the hardest to run. And I'm actually recording right now at 90 FPS doing this. So that gives you kind of an idea of iRacing performance. And you know, for recommending it for a VR user, honestly, if you think you're going to be online racing, there's no better option. And from a virtual reality immersiveness point of view, I would almost say that this is going to be the first title I'm going to show somebody. It actually is incredible. So that's iRacing. Very easy to hit your FPS target. Very optimized. It's almost like in certain cases you kind of get what you pay for. Now I know it's like technically rented out content as opposed to like Rfactor 2 where you own it, since you're paying a subscription with iRacing along with buying your content, which is pretty nuts. But really, the way that, you know, it's super impressive at the same time. So that's iRacing, and that's an obvious recommendation. I would say iRacing in virtual reality is much, much better than Rfactor 2 is. Now, if Rfactor 2 could hit the target FPS, hit multi-car grids, and hit maybe some higher graphic settings, you know, that already exist in the game, not saying add any more graphic details, but just stuff that we can already select from, and it was still optimized enough to hit 90 FPS, I'd be in Rfactor 2 right now instead of iRacing. So, but that's just not the case. iRacing runs absolutely beautiful, looks beautiful, it's like a perfect combo of, okay, like, you know, I can tell that some of these the graphics in the background may be a little outdated, but that also helps the game run better. So gonna be really interesting if they actually add rain and stuff like that to this game and see how that handles in VR. But for now, this game's incredibly optimized. If you have the money and you're actually looking to do more serious racing, there's just no better option. And from a VR standpoint, you know, honestly can't really recommend it enough. So I would say start off your trial with like, you know, $12, $13, hop in that stupid cursed Mazda car that you're going to be driving in for too many hours before getting into GT3 racing to get out of rookie class. But once you do, it's really amazing. So yeah, I can't recommend it enough. Very amazing title in VR. Alright guys, so here we are in Assetto Corsa. Now, one thing I want to mention that was incredible right off the bat is that I saw this game once on sale for $4 and all of the DLC on sale for $12. So, not to mention the infinite amount of content provided through the modding community is absolutely wild. It really is an endless sandbox title that, you know, there's free roam, there's the actual racing's good, there's a little bit of online. It's absolutely a spectacular title. Now, for today's purposes, you know, I could touch on, you know, the driving model, just briefly, I guess, and how it feels versus the other two. Now, this game took a lot of tinkering, a lot of, you know, playing with the force feedback settings. But like, I originally thought it was really bad, and then I dialed up some settings like the road, the curb effects, all this and that, and you know, I got it actually feeling to the point where I would say it's probably better than iRacing's. Maybe sometimes iRacing's better in some scenarios and AC's better in some scenarios. And I also got like the sound mod, all the engine sound mod for the GT3, so it sounds more up to date, more crisp, more raw.
I got the graphics mods going. You know, I have a bunch of mods installed in this, and that's the freedom that, you know, AC has in terms of, you know, what the modding community can do, and it becomes way more valuable than that $4 title that was on sale for. Now with the driving model though, it does feel a bit more slippery in general. So like, it's a bit more challenging than iRacing driving, I would say. So I think there was a point where iRacing driving was definitely probably known as a bit more challenging than AC. Now I think AC might be a bit more challenging because you have to, like, you do slip around a bit more. You do a bit more sliding, pushing on the limit. You can still like catch slides and it's super rewarding, but it may seem a bit more challenging if you're starting to get into VR and you pick up AC and you may be used to like a Project Cars 2, or you're used to, you know, at Forza, whatever you may have played, and you're just starting off in VR and you want to get a game. You know, AC's driving model is incredibly rewarding, but can be pretty challenging at times. But it's also gonna like challenge your skill set and actually grow your skill set. So like catching slides, you understand how it feels. There's a lot going for the driving model in AC, but you know, I feel like I still do kind of stand by the Rfactor 2's driving does feel. Look at the fireworks going off even. That's amazing. And the hot air balloon, of course, in the air, which is awesome. Bunch of little extra details in AC. So Assetto Corsa, how is it in terms of immersion in VR though? So right now, it took a while. I'm not gonna lie, it did take a while to get it to this point, and find what settings to turn on and what settings to turn off in order to withstand my 90 FPS. Like right now, I'll put my head down and we'll see. You know, it was at 86% usage, 90 FPS, and I have it late afternoon, so we should, you know, see the sun start coming down and whatnot soon to be able to get like a representation of how the FPS performs. But I'm gonna tell you right now, it's still amazing. Running the Nordschleife during sunset and then going into nighttime, my goodness, it gave me that like butterfly feeling again, like when you kind of first put on VR, except this time it was more like, wow, I'm actually kind of in shock that this isn't real. With some of the scenes, especially when like there's a bunch of cars close to you and you're all flying down straightaways and the sun's setting over that long strip at the end of the Nordschleife. Oh my gosh. So AC, so the one thing that I don't quite understand about AC though is there is some like general fuzziness layer over anything beyond like almost like 10 feet. I don't know how to describe it. And like I can read my text on the dash, like 30AB, you know, I see my speed, I see TC, like I can see stuff on the dash, but it is even like the close-up objects is a little bit fuzzier than, you know, other titles. Like Rfactor 2 is crystal clear, iRacing is crystal clear, and you know, I turned off depth of field and I turned off motion blur, which seemed to actually help quite a bit because it was pretty bad before, and it helped a bit, but I still feel like there's maybe something I'm missing. And if anyone knows about AC or fuzziness, because even on a monitor I noticed it's a bit fuzzier than the other titles. I don't know if that's just the game. I've tried different post-processing. I've tried taking post-processing off. That's kind of besides the point, but if you are getting into this game in VR, you are going to have to do a lot of tinkering in order to get it set up exactly how you want it and to look the best. But once you do, my goodness. Now, I know that I've said there's a little bit of a layer of fuzziness, like this Porsche in front of me. There's a slight bit of fuzziness, but the actual car model, the lighting, the everything else, it's the best. No other game, you know, presents itself. I like this a lot better than AMS2 even. So, you know, we'll talk about that later, but AC, it has that clean look to it. I like this game's graphics with all the mods and stuff more than any other title. So really, if I could have the AC graphics and content, Rfactor 2 driving, iRacing online, man, that's like the perfect sim. But that's obviously not the case, which is why we're kind of divvying up these titles. Now in VR though, once I have my shoes, my gloves, my seat belt, and you know, engine sounds cranked up, and I'm here in, you know, AC, this has given me the most immersive experiences. Whether I'm taking a McLaren P1 down the LA canyons, whether I'm actually doing a race on the Nordschleife, a race on Road Atlanta here, no matter where I am, this has offered the most immersive experience in terms of, you know, how real it feels and looks. So AC, for the price, obviously it's a no-brainer. It's infinite content. Like I said, car mods, sound mods, free tracks. The game plus the DLC at that time was under $20. You know, I just, you know, got a pack on Rfactor 2 for $50. One car in iRacing is $15 Canadian, and tracks like $18 or closer to $20 Canadian. Now the quality of it's super high, but AC, especially if you're just getting started, you do have to do some tinkering. but I would recommend this as the starting point. Get AC if you don't have it. Once dialed in with the graphic settings, once you learn, it's super easy to install. Lots of videos online how to install all these mods. And then once you do, it's the most immersive experience once it's all. Like, I found Horizon Shades to be an incredible post processing filter, and you know, everything just pops. The colors pop. This car beside me right now, like, that looks so good. Oh man. And that's what I mean, like, those type of scenes in Assetto Corsa just kind of hit different. The graphics are so good. But yeah, so Assetto Corsa, VR immersion. I'm actually going to rank this from a VR standpoint, not, let's say, driving experience standpoint necessarily, but VR standpoint. This is my #1 title. This has offered the most immersive racing experiences. You can do multi-car races and still hold your 90 FPS. You can have day-night cycles going on. You can hold your 90 FPS. It's really, really amazing. So it's just the driving model, you know, it is like, it's different than the other two. It's a little bit maybe more, you know, weighty, let's say. A little more weighty, a little more slippy, but you get to catch your slides. You get to feel what the car is doing. Very engaging, challenging, and rewarding driving experience. You know, while maybe not as detailed handling as iRacing or as, you know, communicative as Rfactor 2 on the force feedback, it offers an amazing middle ground like that. Like, I could kind of catch that because I knew what the car was doing at that particular time. It still communicates everything you need to know about correcting. And the graphics, man, whew, the graphics are like, this is a wild scene. This is why I can't wait for the Pimax. If they actually do that 12K QLED or whatever it is, I can't believe. The first thing I would do is load up AC if I get that new headset. So yeah, that's Assetto Corsa. This is taking my most immersive title in VR, and this is the one I would say that, you know, you should start off with if you're getting into VR or just getting into racing. And even if you've only been in iRacing, if you've only been into Rfactor, this in VR is absolutely wild. And I think anyone with a VR headset, even if you don't like racing, deserves to try this just for how immersive it is. And you know, I got into VR, like I've said a couple times in my videos, just for Half-Life Alyx. I just wanted to play Half-Life Alyx. Didn't even think about racing. And then, you know, saw that I had a Assetto Corsa already in my Steam library, and I got a G27 wheel, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, then I wanted to up my headset. Then I wanted to up my racing gear. And because this is the most immersive experience I think that, you know, I've ever had in VR, maybe flying might beat it in some cases for some people, but driving in VR is the most immersive I've ever been, or immersed I've ever been in a gaming title. And Assetto Corsa, modded out, hands down, is the most immersive title. There's just that, like, very tiny layer, almost like a fuzz layer. And I think I'm gonna figure it out at some point because it's definitely some type of game setting. But yeah, guys, that's Assetto Corsa.
All right, so I still have like a VR face a little bit. So just a couple of mentions then. So one being Automobilista 2, which I haven't really played in a long time now. So I had the Reverb G2 and it worked great. However, even with the 3090, I still had to dial my super sampling down a bit to be able to run it in the G2. I think I had it at like 92%, because anything under 90, my eyes actually start getting strained. And I had to use it, I think it was like 92 or 90, and then like once, like, you know, again, sunset and sunrise seems to be an issue with FPS, especially if there's multiple cars running on the grid. However, AMS2 in terms of immersion, I think once dialed in, I'm almost going to say once we have maybe a more optimized headset, more optimized hardware, could be the most immersive driving experience. Project Cars 2 is also very immersive, but it doesn't run as well as AMS2, nor does it look as well, nor do I feel like the driving is necessarily as interactive as the other titles that I've just mentioned. So AMS2, I would rate it pretty darn high in terms of a VR experience. But for me personally, I do like the driving feel of RF2, AC, and iRacing over AMS2. However, the graphics, the Unreal Engine, it does still run very well. So I do have to include just saying that for AMS2. And I don't have footage of it, unfortunately, because I have the Pimax 8KX now, and I tried it once, and it does require parallel projection. And apparently there's a way to change that by putting numbers in the Steam app ID, but it didn't work for me. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to share any AMS2 footage because parallel projection drops your FPS basically in half. And I don't want to go like 40% super sampling just to play it. So it can be incredibly immersive. It kind of depends in that case then what headset you have. So right now, how these stack up for me, I'm mentioning this just because ACC by far the very bottom in terms of a virtual reality experience. There are people that, oh, I have it smooth and looking great, and oh, I've tried so many things on a 3090, and there's too many compromises all the time. Not to mention that completely lame ghosting effect behind the car unless you have AA turned to the extra setting. And even then, there's still some ghosting. I don't know what the heck is up with that, but it's more apparent in VR than it is on a screen. So ACC just runs... the game to me isn't good enough in order to justify all the extra stuff you have to put up with in order to get it working in VR. So ACC is the very bottom for me. Next, we have Rfactor 2. Next, we have, this is close. I'm going to say AMS2. And then next, we have iRacing. And then next, we have Assetto Corsa. I think, though, if we have the better hardware and potentially a better headset for VR immersion, AMS2 would probably take the crown out of all of the titles here. In terms of driving, though, I do prefer the driving feel in the other games, but for VR immersion, AMS2 would be pretty dang hard to beat. So that's how these racing titles stack up for me. Rfactor 2, so much potential, but too many compromises to be made. ACC, I've refunded the game twice. I just can't get it going the way I want to. So again, sorry, ACC, Rfactor 2, AMS2, iRacing, Assetto Corsa. And if anyone has an idea on how to get Assetto Corsa to not be somewhat fuzzy, I'm all ears. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Those are kind of my titles that I recommend. AC, get right off the bat, no question. iRacing, if you want to be more serious in your online racing. Rfactor 2 can be incredible, but there's a lot of compromises to make. So those two are going to be the king, I think, for VR immersion. And give AMS2 a try. However, with Pimax headsets, and where you have to use parallel projection, to me it's not quite worth it. And the driving experience I prefer in AC anyways. So again, AC and iRacing. So I hope you guys liked this video or found it helpful. If you have any comment if you have any opinions, or if you have any help to provide to me for getting AC looking even better than it does, I'm all ears. And then, Rfactor 2 is making me debate going out and getting two. I kept one of the screens from my triples review, so I'm debating picking up the 2 again just for Rfactor 2, but we'll see. So thank you guys for watching. Bye for now, guys. Take care.